Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to see everyone for our first virtual community practice on post-secondary transition planning in middle school. My name is Deanna Taylor, and I'm one of the post-secondary transition specialists at the Utah Board of Education. And I'll introduce our speaker in just a little bit, but first I wanted to just a couple of announcements and then just kind of a introduction to how this virtual community of practice came about. So first of all, if you're signed up in Midas, that's great. You're all good to go for getting points through this series of events. And there's about 6 of these sessions throughout the year. And at the end of the year, I will enter all of the Midas points at once. So if you're not signed up in Midas, that's okay. We are asking people to write their name, their LEA in school, and specific role in their setting. Sorry to make you do double duty, but there's also a USBE sign in. And so we're working on fine tuning, streamlining that process. But anyway,
Earbuds.
if you're not enrolled in Midas, I will take care of that at the end of the year. And hopefully you're in the system so that you can get your points. But you can also email me offline if you have questions about that. So we are going to have a great session today on pre-employment transition services. But first, I would like to just give you a few little facts about how this series of community of practice sessions came about. About a year ago, we surveyed educators who were educators of students with disabilities at the middle school level. And so we sent out the survey, and the reason why we did this is because there's a growing acknowledgement in the field that post-secondary transition planning and services should begin earlier than age 14. Definitely by age 14, because that's the law, but research shows that the earlier you start, the better the outcome. So we sent out the survey. We had 53 respondents. The majority of those taught grades 6 through 8. And we had a few administrators answer. One of the questions was, how familiar are you with the post-secondary transition process? And about 79% said they were familiar with post-secondary transition. And then we asked them to acknowledge what the challenges and support needs were in that survey. And some of the key challenges that came out of that survey were family and student buy-in, resource availability, and realistic goal setting were the main ones. And then some of the support needs that came out of that survey were more resources, training, and community connections to better support students. So from there, we generated questions from the survey results, and we formed a focus group of people who agreed that they would like to be part of that. About 20 people were invited to participate that had indicated the desire to participate. 18 actually accepted the invitation. We decided on a date, which I think was in April of last year, April or May. We had a very small group participate because, it was April and May, right? And we know what that's like in schools. But then we followed up with the rest of the group to actually help gather the information. And so from there, we generated from the results of the focus group, we generated the needs that came out of that subsequently led to the formation of this virtual community of practice. So what we found was that there's a significant need for clearer guidance, better training, general resources, consistent access to resources like pre-employment transition services. That was a big one. And improved collaboration structures to support students and families. And specifically, developing guidelines for what post-secondary transition skills middle school students should have. and should achieve before they get to high school, support in teaming and collaboration, and support with the implementation of YouScience, which that's also going to be one of our sessions this year. One of the biggest barriers that was cited was, and this is common among a lot of initiatives, is a major barrier to collaboration was time, just finding the time to do that collaboration. So then we created this this virtual community of practice, and our first session today is on pre-employment transition services. And I am pleased to announce or introduce to you first Lavinia Grippentrog, who's one of our other post-secondary transition specialists, is with us today, and then specifically running the content for the session is Maria Baldwin from the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation, and I'll let her do further introduction of herself. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Maria, for being here to provide the content.
Sure, you bet. So I'm Maria Baldwin. I am a pre-ETS program specialist at the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation. So I work with a team of pre-ETS instructors, as well as our individual VR districts and some contractors throughout the state to make sure that access to pre-ETS is available for all the students who would like to participate, who meet our criteria. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that criteria is as we go through the presentation. Do you think, Deanna, we're okay to move off of the sign-in slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So that's just my info. So the intention for our session today is really to help you be able to identify or define what pre-employment transition services are and the relevance to middle school students specifically, to be able to identify key steps for initiating pre-ETS activities and programs in a middle school or junior high setting, and then be able to describe various examples of pre-ETS activities that are applicable to the pre-ETS age group. So that's what we're hoping that we achieve with today. So pre-ETS are services designed to provide students with disabilities with information, support, experiences that really help them explore their vocational interests, their preferences, and really help them to understand what their abilities are. And participation in pre-ETS is really meant to provide preparation for engagement in transition. So that includes understanding how a student's strengths, interests, and needs impact vocational decisions, job exploration, career pathway development, and development of self-advocacy skills. Why is this important to middle schoolers? It really helps, pre-ETS can help provide an early start at career exploration. If we can get our kids, for us, our starting age is 14. If we can get our 14-year-olds to really start to think about where it is they want to go and what they want to do, and we can sort of think about not only the transition from, school to employment, but also a little bit just helping to support them in the transition from junior high to high school and what's going to look different and different things like that. We can just kind of help be a support as long as what we're talking about relates to employment in the future. Focus is to expose students to careers of interest while practicing work skills and social skills within the school environment. It can also, pre-ETS can help provide job exploration and preparation experiences for middle school students, which can increase confidence levels for students who would like to work during high school. The younger the students are, so starting at 14, maybe there aren't a lot of employers out there who want to hire 14-year-olds necessarily, but we can help provide some experiences so that they start to understand what having a job could look like. They get to maybe explore some different kinds of career options. And then as they move into high school, they can look at then maybe what they want to do for a career. And I don't know, I can't see if there are questions or comments or anything. So you're welcome to interrupt me if there's anything that we need to talk about. I keep hearing a little beep, so. All right, and then for USOR, which is vocational rehabilitation, it's really integral in helping students with disabilities age 14 to 22 prepare to transition from school to employment and independence, and all of the services that are involved in pre-ETS really help students be able to do that. Okay, so partnerships that exist within the schools for pre-ETS. We've got pre-ETS instructors and we've got pre-ETS contract providers. And those two sets of entities really help vocational rehabilitation meet our mandate of serving students statewide. And the mandate I'm talking about is involved in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act of 2014, which amended our Rehabilitation Act, which basically said, vocational rehabilitation needs to now reach out to not only students who are already engaged with voc rehab, but also students who are what we call potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation services, to see what kinds of supports we can provide. And we have 15% of our federal budget that is set aside specifically for the provision of pre-ETS. And it's the same in all states across the nation. Pre-ETS instructors and contractors can serve students who have vocational rehabilitation already, but they can also serve students who are potentially eligible for VR. They can do this for our instructors during the school year. That's going to look mostly like job readiness workshops. So they can come in and work with groups of students in a classroom setting. Students need to be between the ages of 14 and 22. So 14 is kind of a solid bottom range for pre-ETS for us specifically. When we're looking at what our contract providers can do, they work more one-on-one with individual students and talk about work readiness topics, communication, developing soft skills, all those kinds of things. They both can attend transition fairs with your school district or your individual school, depending on how your district is set up. They can assist with planning disability mentoring days. So a lot of times that looks like a business. We've done a lot of disability mentoring at businesses like Goldman Sachs, for example, where students go in, they get to learn about all the different kinds of jobs that are available. They get a tour of the business. Typically, the business will feed them lunch. And so they get to kind of see what it's like to work for that business. And businesses have a wide variety of jobs that they can let students explore. So, just because they're doing an event at Goldman Sachs doesn't mean that it's only the financial part of what they do there that they're going to be talking about. They talk about all the different roles that they have in a business like that, a company like that. And then they can also provide a warm handoff in collaboration with teachers and other school personnel. So this slide I have in there just to kind of share some information. We do sort of like presentations at the high schools for all students who are engaged with special education. So all students on an IEP, Sometimes we'll get some students who are also on 504s, depending on what their schedules look like. But we spend a day at the school and we rotate students through in their, usually it's their skills classes or something like that. And they come in and they get a presentation and we talk about some different things. So it could be career and technical education. It could be concurrent enrollment, could be technical ed. It certainly is going to be vocational rehabilitation and pre-ed. And this data that is shown here is just an example from one of those presentations that was done at Davis High School in the Davis School District. So on a scale of 1 to 5, students rated the following in the presentation. So information they got about CTE, CE, and Davis Tech, they were asked, how interested are you in this information? And so the students rated that as a 4, and then the same was true with vocational rehabilitation. They asked, how interested were you in the information that we presented about voc rehab? And so a 4.3 out of 5. So then, I'd like somebody to follow up with me about concurrent enrollment options. There were 45% of the students who said yes. And so then the folks from the school district were able to go and have those conversations with guidance counselors. College disability services, 44% were interested. And then vocational rehabilitation, 56% of the students who went through the presentations were interested in hearing more about voc rehab. And so the voc rehab counselor for that school reached out to those students. So that just gives you a little idea of something that we did that is not necessarily a job readiness workshop, but we went into the school and talked to all the kids along with their teachers who are in special ed, and just kind of talked about what we can offer and gain some data from that. So some key steps to initiating pre-ed activities. Find out who the VR liaison is for your school and reach out to set up a time to meet with them. We have a VR counselor who is assigned to each school. If for some reason, you can go on our website and find the list of schools. Because you're dealing with middle school students, if your school isn't listed, then you can just reach out to me. That's totally fine. And we can figure out who the liaison is going to be for that school. There may be some districts where the middle schools are all listed as well. And there may be some districts that are a little smaller that maybe the middle schools aren't listed yet. So just let me know if for some reason your school is not listed on that list, and I can find out for you who the person is that you need to reach out to. So communicating logistics with your liaison. So where should they park? What's the check-in protocol? What kind of space do you have for meeting? Where do you want to meet with them? Discuss each person's role and the services provided when you're meeting. Establish open lines of communication and agree on preferred methods of contact. So email, phone, or in person. And then set the goals for collaboration, focusing on the needs of the students. And so we have a document that was created with our wonderful partners at the Utah State Board of Education. There is one version that is steps for educators and school personnel, and then there's another version that is steps for VR professionals. And so each set of staff have a step-by-step process of what it looks like to walk through that collaboration process. So that is available in the slide deck that we'll send out. I would imagine, right, Deanna? We'll send this out. Share it with everyone. Okay. So then talking about what are pre-EPs, just the basic kind of bare bones. Don't even, some of you may not even know like what pre-EPs are. So we have 5 specific things that we work on that are our pre-EPs categories. The first one is job exploration counseling. So it's really referring to activities that help students learn about in-demand occupations, career pathways, and the local labor market. And we're really looking at those things as they apply to what the student is interested in, what their abilities are, and what their skill set is. And job exploration counseling can be provided in classroom, community setting, or an individual session with students. It could include the use of assessment to identify interests, abilities, and opportunities. And we have a variety of assessments. I'm sure you guys have a variety of assessments that you can use as well. So it can be adapted to whatever the student's levels are. So some examples of what job exploration counseling entails: completing an interest survey, researching local labor market information, and identification of a career pathway. Any questions about that one? Okay. So what can a pre-EPs instructor do relating to job exploration counseling? So they can provide job readiness workshops on a variety of employment-related topics to groups of students in a classroom. They can help a student understand how to access labor market information using websites like jobs.utah.gov or Keys to Success. And then they can administer interest surveys to a student or a group of students to help them identify their vocational interests and to aid in transition planning. For contractors, our contractors are working primarily one-on-one with students during the school day. They can administer a brief survey before beginning services to determine what services a student will need to grow in their understanding of employment. And then they assist students in developing an individualized career pathway. So it looks a little bit different because one is doing primarily group and one is doing more individual sessions. And so sometimes what can happen is a student maybe will start with an instructor in a group setting, and then maybe a teacher identifies an individual student or a couple of students who maybe need a little bit of extra support or maybe have a strong interest in, following up with what was done during the job readiness workshop. And so that would be a time to refer to one of our contract providers, and then they can help individually kind of get that student on their pathway. All right, work-based learning experiences. So we're talking about using that real workplace to gain work-related skills. So we call these Weeblies. They can be performed in school, after school, or outside the traditional school setting. They must be performed in an integrated setting to the maximum extent possible. So what we're talking about there is we're not taking students and putting them in sheltered workshops or putting them in some type of cohort where the only person who doesn't have a disability is the supervisor. We're talking about taking students and placing them in a setting where they are working with other people who don't necessarily have disabilities. And truthfully, that's in some way, we probably all have some kind of disability. I had eye surgery to correct cataracts, things like that. So if you wear glasses, you have a visual disability. I mean, truthfully, but a lot of times our employers tend to think about disability as the person in the wheelchair or someone who is blind or something like that. And so getting them to understand that most of our students, those aren't the cases. And so we have a variety of students that we can work with. So We're talking about things like job shadowing for our younger kids, work-based training, maybe a summer work experience, something like that. All right, so what does this look like for an instructor? When we're talking about work-based learning specifically, for an instructor, they are going to be working primarily with vocational rehabilitation clients, and it'll be during the summertime because they're coordinating job exploration experiences with an employer. They're helping a student prepare for an informational interview, setting up workplace tours or volunteer opportunities for a specific student, and then helping to place a student with a business for competitive integrated employment. So it's instructor-wise, they're not going to do a ton of work-based learning experiences with a group of students. Unless they have somebody, a class go to a job fair or something like that. But it's going to be pretty rare. Most of the time when an instructor is doing work-based learning, it's with an individual student, and it's usually during the summer because their school year is pretty busy. Contractors, however, can work with students who are VR eligible, but they can also work with students who are potentially eligible for VR. So if you've got a student who really wants to explore the world of work, a contractor is, and they're not with VR, a contractor is a really good option because the contractor can work with potentially eligible students and set up work-based learning experiences. They can do things like coordinating job shadows. They can help students with informational interviews, workplace tours, volunteer opportunities, and then also helping to place a student with a business for competitive integrated employment. Okay. So then we move on to counseling on post-secondary transition. And so this includes counseling on opportunities in comprehensive transition or post-secondary educational programs at institutions of higher education. So for middle schoolers, we're really talking about exploring the differences between middle school and high school, and then talking about figuring out goals for after high school. Maybe make a plan for what they want to do as they're thinking about it, when they're still in middle school, realizing that that's probably going to change. But we at least try to help them gain some focus on what they might want to do when they get done with middle school and get into high school. So what can an instructor do on counseling on post-secondary? Help students research career pathways, help students learn about careers that fit their interests and abilities, and then help students explore options and find out how their strengths can translate into employment. And this, again, is all done in a group setting for the most part when we're doing job readiness workshops. For the contractor, they're also going to help students explore interests, help them understand how to ask for what they need, make sure students understand options available to them through career and technical education, because they get to work more one-on-one, and even just helping students understand who to talk to if they're interested in career and technical education, because sometimes the students and the families don't really understand how to access that. So we can help with that understanding. All right, workplace readiness training. So activities that promote the development of job readiness, social skills, and independent living skills necessary to prepare for employment. So everything about voc rehab is employment related, as we're going through and talking about all of this stuff. So our job readiness workshops fit in this category, and it's kind of the big umbrella that our job readiness workshops sort of live within. But there's also life skills hours that a community provider or somebody could have to help a student work through some of their needs. And then financial literacy, we also have that we can offer if students need more individualized, sit down and try to understand, what my pay stub is telling me or something like that. We can provide those kinds of support.
Yesterday or like.
Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Then workplace readiness training. So what can a pre-ETS instructor do? This is a list of 10 of the workshops that we have presented in the past. It's not an extensive list of everything that we have. We have a pretty good sized curriculum, but exploring topics like why do we work? What do I want to do for work? How do I self-advocate? What's the difference between a soft skill and a hard skill? How to be a professional, including hygiene. We can come in as an outside person and have that conversation about, you need to be clean, but you don't necessarily need to use half a can of body spray, that kind of stuff. So we can talk to kids about that, and it's not you or their parent having that conversation. So that's one of the more interesting topics that we can help with. Applications, so job applications and resumes. 30-second commercial is one of the most popular things that we provide. Interview prep and then mock interviews. They're probably between the 30-second commercial and the mock interviews are probably two of the things that are the most requested of all the different topics that we cover. Then what can a contractor do? So they can help the student understand the importance of clear communication in school and the future workplace. And they can support the student in learning about the importance of budgeting, financial literacy, hygiene, executive functioning, skill building, and time management. So they can kind of support that student individually, having those conversations about, well, this is why you need to let your employer know. You don't just not show up for work. You got to let somebody know that you're not going to be there. And, if they're not getting your break at the time you think you need it, they can help provide those kinds of supports for our kids, or helping kids just understand what they can and can't ask for. Then self-advocacy. So assisting a student in effectively communicating and conveying his or her own interests and desires, helping students prepare to introduce the people in their IEP meeting. We can provide support with that, and when and how to disclose disability information. So a lot of times we use role plays for different situations where a student might need to advocate. And those have been really popular. We'll break the students into small groups, and sometimes it's just 2 students, sometimes it's 2 or 3, and have them practice with each other, and then have some students volunteer to maybe be the demonstration for the whole group, and just kind of give them a chance to talk about, what did I feel comfortable with? What didn't I feel comfortable with? What kinds of questions came up in my own head when I was the person on the other side hearing the disability information, as opposed to when I was the one telling disability information. So we give them a chance to kind of brainstorm through that and work through those kind of situations and scenarios. So what does an instructor do? Helps build self-advocacy skills, helps the student practice how to ask for an accommodation, and then can assist students with understanding their potential need for assistive technology, especially after school is done, and then how to connect agencies who can help them determine what is appropriate. So an example of that would be the Utah Center for Assistive Technology, or your individual UAT team, for your school district. We can kind of help get that connection made so that people, what we want to avoid is people ending school and realizing too late that they no longer have access to that assistive technology that they've been depending on. We want to try to help get that set up and going before they're done with school, so that it's a smooth transition. So in terms of a contractor, they can work with individual students to help them understand how, when, and who to disclose disability information to. And then they can role play scenarios with students individually, helping them to understand how much to disclose. Because we have some students who would just kind of tell you everything, and some students who really have been kind of sheltered, and maybe they don't even understand why they have an IEP. So they can kind of help work with both of those kinds of circumstances. All right, any questions or comments? No?
I don't see any in the chat, so.
Okay. Awesome. All right, so how can you partner with vocational rehabilitation to make a real difference for your students? So an intro to high school, transition parent nights. We can be there to help parents understand the options and supports that are available to help their students and help them understand how to navigate that transition from middle school to high school. Job readiness workshops in the classrooms in a group setting. It just gives the students an introduction to pre-ETs and the skills that will benefit them for their future. And then applying for voc rehab if it's something that is appropriate for students after the age of 14. But they will get more support from a VR counselor. So if you've got students who have pretty high support needs, applying for VR early in the process is a really good idea. If you've got students who you're not quite sure, it might be better to engage with pre-ETs early on and kind of see how they do, what kinds of supports they're going to need. And then, you can kind of talk with either the contractor or the instructor to determine, would applying for VR be the best thing we can do? Certainly, if the student is going to need more supports that have, a monetary cost, then we would need to go through VR because we can't authorize what we call authorizing. We can't authorize for any services for students who are not connected with voc rehab and VR clients, if that makes sense to people. But for students who just need help with a resume, just need, a little bit of maybe hand holding to get them set on the right path, pre-ETs can be just what they need, and then they're ready to take off. So it really just depends, as we say in VR, that's our, what do we need to do? And for us, the most common answer is it depends, because it really is individualized to the student and what their needs are. All right, so just to kind of summarize, VR counselors, pre-ETs instructors, and pre-ETs contractors help VR meet the federal mandate to offer pre-ETs to students statewide. Providers are here to be a valuable resource to students and teachers, and we don't want you to hesitate in contacting your local VR district, a VR counselor, school liaison, or pre-ETs instructor if you have questions or would like to schedule a time to talk about services for your students. And just at the end here, we have contact information for everyone on our team. So Amy Langoni is our transition and supported employment coordinator, and she covers everyone throughout the state. I cover our northern area. So these are written by primarily our VR district offices, not school districts, because we don't necessarily draw the same lines that the school districts do. So I cover northern Utah, Ogden, Davis, our Salt Lake downtown office and then our South Valley office. Elise Harvard is also a program specialist. She covers Taylorsville, Tooele, Roosevelt, Vernal, Price, and Blanding. So kind of the eastern and the middle part of the Salt Lake Valley. And then Annette Kint, who is on our call today, is our program specialist who covers our more southern part of the state. So from Provo, Spanish Fork, Richfield, down to Cedar City and St. George. So you're welcome to reach out to any of us when you have a question, and we are glad to help you out. So that, I think, well, let me see. I think I have one more slide. Yes. So we just have a follow-up survey to ask for feedback.
Thank you, Maria, for all of the wealth of information you've provided. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but now would be the time to unmute those of you that are listening and ask questions of Maria or any other questions that you may have. Or anything you'd like to share about your own experiences if you've had them.
Has anybody out there worked with vocational rehabilitation in your middle school or junior high setting?
My school has worked a lot with them, and I just feel like every time we tap into it, like, I don't know why I didn't start sooner. Like every student, they're like, "What? How? This is awesome!" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm so sorry." Like so over the past like 2 or 3 years, we've kind of started integrating with Priettes, and yeah, so far it's been awesome. We do have a tricky situation though at our school because we cover the whole state of Utah. And so then we have to tap into multiple Priettes providers because there's the Southern Utah and the Northern Utah and whatever. So, but
Yep.
Highly recommend. It's been amazing.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. I'm glad that it's gone well. And yeah, for virtual schools, it gets a little bit more complicated because we work based on where the student is located physically in the state. Yep, but yay. Thank you for that.
Other questions or comments?
So I don't see Maria's name on the survey. Should it be going under someone else?
Maria, do you answer that question?
Oh, it was about the survey.
Yeah.
So it gives me a whole list of names, but I don't see Maria Baldwin on there. I see a Maria.
I think that's because it's all USBE employees, so you probably want to put Dana Taylor, since this is her. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, this is a USBE survey.
Yeah, so unfortunately it is. When we have guests, they don't get added to the list, I don't believe.
Okay. That makes sense.
I wanted to show you, share with you actually,
Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, that would be great. One resource that we have available that is still being developed, but it's a Padlet. Those of you who are well familiar with our resources know that we love Padlets.
Padlets are great.
Yeah, I put the link in the chat to our early post-secondary transition planning middle school Padlet, and the recordings for these sessions will be in there, as well as the materials, as well as a lot of other resources. So let me just see if I can successfully share my screen. That's always the issue. Let's see. Can you see that, my screen?
Not quite yet. It looks like it's still
Here we go. Okay.
processing. Yep, now we can.
Okay, so you can see the Padlet okay? It's not too small.
Yeah, no, it looks great.
Okay. All right. So yeah, this is our middle school transition planning Padlet, and you can see it's divided. I tried to divide it into the categories of themes that came out of the focus group and the survey, and the if you have any suggestions about how it should be organized or what other resources you'd like to see on it, just let me know. But basically, it starts off with an overview, and then the second column is all about the predictors of post-school success for students with disabilities, which many of you know that we keep talking about these because they're really important to a student's future as they transition into adulthood. They're all 23 predictors of in-school experiences that have shown to improve post-school outcomes for students. So there's lots of material there to read about the predictors. Post-secondary transition planning column has our skills mapping tool. That's one of the sessions later in the year, some timelines and tips for writing compliant transition plans. Then there's a column on assessments, post-secondary transition assessments. I believe there there's a link to some assessments in self-advocacy. I don't see that I put our Padlet on assessments there, so I'll make sure I do that. And YouScience will be something that is placed on here. That will be the next session in October. The next column is on services and collaboration, and that's where we have our pre-employment transition services and other sessions that we will have throughout the year on collaboration and services. And then next we have self-determination and self-advocacy, which you don't have to wait till they're 14 to start that. I can start as early as pre-K. So we have lots of resources there, including our app for transition planning for students. Parent engagement, we'll add resources to that column as we get them, and that will also be one of our sessions this year in January. And then some general guides and timelines and curriculum. So that's our Padlet. And of course, like I said, we always welcome feedback on that and any resources that we provide for you. So yeah, any questions or comments?
I have one more question for Maria.
Great.
I heard that with what's going on in DC right now, that Priyats was going to be changed a little bit. Do you know anything about that, or is that happening, or should we just business as normal for now?
Yeah, it says business as normal.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's always good to ask.
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome.
Yeah, well,
Thanks,
if there are
everybody.
any other questions, that's what we have for you today. And like I said, the next session is October 15th. The session will be on how to use YouScience. And our speaker will be Melanie Allen from Davis School District. And some of you may know her, and we're excited about that. So reach out if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to assist you. And thank you for participating today.
Yeah, thanks.
Julissa, I can hang on for a minute after everybody's gone.
Thanks so much, Maria. That was great. Even though I know Priyats so well, every time you guys come, I learn more. And I loved the examples, especially that you provided and kind of the differences between the way that Priyats are provided. So thank you so much.
You bet. Happy to do it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Hope to see you
10
next
minutes
time.
back in your day.
That's right.
Okay, thanks, Lavinia, for taking attendance.
Yeah, you bet. I got everyone on the sheet and then I added those, that weren't there. So I'll see you all later.